this one, I like to tie in anytime we get some interesting golf topics because our sports are somewhat adjacent. So if you were watching, we had the U.S. Open this past weekend, a very interesting U.S. Open on arguably the hardest golf course ever displayed on tour. It was a combination of an insane setup with some insane weather that made Oakmont absolutely a disaster out there. So here's what I want to know. The golf world pushed the boundaries of course difficulty this past weekend at U.S. Open with only one player managing to finish under par, and it really got to the very last putt to do so. Should disc golf hold more events that push these boundaries? Is it realistic to even get the best players near even par? What would that look like? And would it even be fun to watch? Is that something we even want to have, Moses?
Yeah, I think I'm going to look at this from a more holistic tour approach. Disc golf is a very young sport. When we talk about golf, we talk about prestige, we talk about excellence, we talk about these tournaments that have a lot of history to them. The Pro Tour has existed for 10 years, whereas these golf events have existed for 10 times the amount of time, if not longer. Continuing to have different types of tournaments in disc golf, I think, is one of the unique things about it. For example, Northwoods Black, that is considered probably the hardest course on tour, and for somebody to win in 4 rounds at 15 down, that's pretty equivalent, I feel like, in disc golf to shooting like -1 in golf, honestly. As easy as disc golf is. People love the preserve, for example. Gannon just won shooting 14 down per round. I think having different types of tournaments where there's going to be different types of scoring, we've always had shreddable courses on tour, but at the end of the day, I think the back end of the field is kind of catching up a little bit to where there isn't as much teeth for any amount of the field, let alone, just the lower end of the field. But yeah, having different types of disparity per event, I think fans enjoy seeing the players shred. I think fans enjoy seeing players struggle. But for a course to average even par, would that be fun for the players? Would we enjoy seeing that sort of thing? Northwoods Black was an absolute slugfest over 4 rounds. By the end of it, yeah, we enjoyed watching it. But is that something that we're really wanting to see? At OB at that course, even more so, you're going to have people shooting, even par or anything like that. But I just don't really know if that's exactly what we're looking for.
Okay, Brody, what do you think? Would it make for good golf, and is it even doable?
So it is doable, but I don't know if it's doable in the short term because you do need a lot of land, and the way that courses are currently set up, you would have to change a whole lot about them for it to go that way. What was the other question? Is would we like it type of thing?
Yeah, would it be entertaining?
I think it would give, because here's the thing. I think when people think about players shooting close to par, what they think about is just tons of OB, and they think about tons of artificial OB, and they just hate the way that feels or looks. So there's a couple of things you can do to basically make it more challenging without the OB. I still think there needs to be OB. I think there needs to be forced carries. There needs to be something to where if you throw a shot 150 feet short of where you're trying to throw it, it doesn't skip off the ground and give you a circle 2 putt. It catches tall grass and you're in a hazard. Or, that's the thing with disc golf is there's a lot of bad shots that end up good. I think there was one shot this past week. I remember Gannon basically throwing it out of his hand and immediately being like, oh my God, that was so terrible. And it hit the pole on the basket. And it's because overstable disc correct bad shots. If you pull an overstable disc and there's nothing for it to hit, it's going to end up being a good shot. So I'm not going to talk about disc technology because I think that would be an exciting way of saying get rid of overstable disc, make people have to actually throw good shots. But L-shaped holes, make it to where if you don't get around the corner, you're screwed. One of the reasons why Northwood Black is so challenging is some of the holes on there where players are getting 10s, 11s. They don't know how to play holes where they're actually L-shaped. The other thing, longer shots. We can't be having par 3s or par 4s where if you throw one decent shot, you're going to get a birdie, and then obviously smaller chains in the baskets.
All right, Hunter, what do you think about the U.S. Open model, how that would apply to disc golf?
Well, I think the tough thing we're dealing with here is when you're looking at how they make a course in golf harder is the rough got way longer, the greens were incredibly difficult, and it's a lot of times the short game almost that get the fairways might get narrower and whatever, but a lot of times it's like the greens are crazy fast. You were showing me there's not that back shelf to stop stuff, yada, yada, yada. In disc golf, putting is putting. You can't make putting harder without changing the baskets, which if we're not talking about that, the hard part here is you would have to make the driving and the second shot way harder. So, you know, the only way I really thought of that could accomplish both, because if you just make the woods way tighter where it's almost like you're thrown into a bamboo jungle, and now we're just watching pitch outs and players hitting a tree right in front of them. No one wants to see that. If you just make artificial OB everywhere, again, it gets confusing for the viewer. No one wants to see that. The only thing I think could still be enjoyable to watch that would fit this is bringing back stroke and distance. So making forced carries, bringing in tighter OB, where if I throw, it doesn't matter how far up I progress. My only example for this that is entertaining to watch is the bunker rule, is the closest thing we've had in recent history. And watching AB throw the tournament away was electric, and it made it way harder. So if there was more of that going on, where you're way far back in the fairway, you throw a good shot, it skips OB, you have to re-execute that shot, and you're getting an OB stroke, that could greatly increase the amount of strokes we're seeing. And I think it could get players closer to par, make a lot more decision making, because now maybe you have to play safe because you're worried I can't throw this 500-foot shot twice. That's the only thing I could think of. But realistically, it's a different sport, right? Like golf, you go out and your average player is shooting way over par. So it's still mesmerizing to watch a player shoot even par on a really hard course. In disc golf, your average guys are going out there and shredding their local courses. So I don't think it would translate very well if the player's winning a tournament at +2 or 1 under in disc golf. I don't think it would work well. It's a different sport.
Sure. Gary, do you see any way to make this happen, or is it just, like Hunter said, a different sport, not really feasible?
It's a little of this and that. I think what it looks like, it was relatively easy to answer because it kind of looks like the 2024 Champions Cup, which Moses mentioned. In a field of nearly 100 players across 4 rounds, only 6 times was a score better than 5 under par even carded across the entire event. The winner only shot 15 under across the 4 rounds. That's 3.8 strokes under par per round, and only 4 people finished double digits under par. And that was fun to watch. I really, really enjoyed that, especially as someone who's played the course. It was super fun to watch. And it also kind of looks like the Cascade Challenge earlier this year, which, was difficult because it was kind of a newer layout and everything like that. But only 10 players finished better than double digits at that course, too. But what do both those have in common? They're tough wooded courses. Is it definitely possible to get players closer to par? Sure, like some of the things that have been brought up. But the real question is, should we be caring about getting players closer to par? And I think the answer to that is a resounding no, at least not all the time. I think part of what's important is diversity on the tour. Tough wooded courses, some bomber courses, some park style courses. All of these are fun to watch, especially because it challenges a wide array of skill sets of being able to play consistently, deal with difficulty, make decisions. You know what we should be caring about instead, and that's getting more eyes in the sport by designing courses that allow for that, and making courses that challenge touring pros appropriately by having layouts that make sense for the FPO. Layouts that make sense for the MPO. If we make courses harder and the skills develop around them to come to the challenges, great. But we're too beholden to historic courses, and I think that we need to innovate and create diversity and meaningful challenges. And if we do those things, the problem kind of presented by this question is going to solve itself. But we do have to be careful, because no matter how we like to design our course, the Pro Tour will just come in and add its own OB anyway.
It's true. When I was thinking about this, and I was thinking of ways to, like, okay, how do we like simulate this idea of it's so hard to be under par? And it's because, like, the US Open, they're different sports, but like you can see it in these guys' eyes. They're playing a brand of golf they're not used to, and it drives them nuts. I mean, Wyndham Clark went in and blew up the locker room in Oakmont because he was like, these guys are in disbelief. So I think it's almost supposed to look unnatural. And one thing I thought with disc golf is, like, I agree, stroke and distance works, pace of play nightmare though, and there are other solutions that maybe are tough to visualize. Maybe the way you do it is you just make the courses super, super narrow and you play it all as hazard. So that way you're still advancing your disc, but you're just collecting a ton of strokes on the way if you're not throwing the most precise shot. So you got a picture really small greens, and anywhere you land out of there is just hazard. So that way pace of play is the same, but you're still adding a ton of strokes and getting punished if you make the smallest mistake, because that's what the US Open in golf is all about. You make the tiniest mistake, that ball hops from the first cut into the rough, and all of a sudden you're taking an entire extra stroke because you have to hack it out of there.